Chapter 6. Climbing. Diligent search among the many scenarios of the improvisers from that time has failed to bring to light the script of
The Cheats of Scaramouche.
We are told that the fortunes of the Binet troupe were soundly established on this play. They played it for the first time at Moore in the following week, with André-Louis in the title role. By now, he was known as Scaramouche to all the company and to the public alike. If he had acquitted himself well as Figaro Scaramouche, he excelled himself in this new piece. Its scenario appeared to be very much the better of the two. After Moore came Pipriac. They gave 4 performances there, featuring 2 of each of the scenarios that now formed the backbone of the Binet repertoire. In both plays, Scaramouche was beginning to find himself, and he materially improved his performances. The 2 pieces ran so smoothly now that Scaramouche actually suggested a bold idea to Binet. He proposed that after Fougeray, which they were to visit in the following week, they should tempt fortune in a real theater in the important town of Redon. The notion terrified Binet at first, but when he thought about it, and with his ambition fanned by André-Louis, he ended by allowing himself to succumb to the temptation. It seemed to André-Louis in those days that he had found his real calling. He was not only beginning to like it, but actually looking forward to a career as an actor-author. This career might indeed lead him in the end to that mecca of all comedians, the Comédie Française. And there were other possibilities. From writing skeleton scenarios for improvisers, he might pass to writing fully dialogued plays. He could write plays in the proper sense of the word, after the manner of Chenier, Eglantine, and Beaumarchais. The fact that he dreamed such dreams shows how kindly he had taken to the profession. Chance and Binet had conspired to thrust him into it. I do not doubt that he had real talent both as author and as actor. I am persuaded that if things had fallen out differently, he would have won a lasting place among French dramatists and fully realized his dream. Now, even though it was a dream, he did not neglect the practical side of it.
You realize,
He told Binet,
that I have the power to make your fortune for you.
He and Binet were sitting alone together in the parlor of the inn at Pipriac, drinking a very excellent bottle of Volnay. It was the night after the 4th and last performance of
The Cheats.
There, business in Pipriac had been just as excellent as in Moore and Guéchin. You will have gathered this from the fact that they were drinking Volnay.
I will concede it, my dear Scaramouche, so that I may hear the sequel. I am disposed to exercise this power if the inducement is sufficient. You will realize that a man does not sell such exceptional gifts as mine for 15 livres a month. There is an alternative.
Binet said darkly.
There is no alternative. Don't be a fool, Binet.
Binet sat up as if he had been prodded. Members of his company did not take this tone of direct rebuke with him.
Anyway, I will make you a present of it.
Scaramouche pursued airily.
Exercise it if you please. Step outside and inform the police that they can lay hands upon one André-Louis Moreau. But that will be the end of your fine dreams of going to Redon and playing in a real theater for the first time in your life. You can't do it without me, and you know it. I am not going to Redon or anywhere else. In fact, I am not even going to Fougeray until we have an equitable arrangement. But why so much heat?
Binet complained.
And all for what? Why must you assume that I have the soul of a usurer? When our little arrangement was made, I had no idea that you would prove so valuable to me. How could I? You only had to remind me, my dear Scaramouche. I am a just man. From today you shall have 30 livres a month. See, I double it at once. I am a generous man. But you are not ambitious. Now listen to me for a moment.
He proceeded to unfold a scheme that filled Binet with paralyzing terror.
After Redon, Nantes,
He said.
Nantes and the Theatre Feydeau.
Binet choked in the act of drinking. The Theatre Feydeau was a sort of provincial Comédie Française. The great Fleury had played there to an audience as critical as any in France. The very thought of Redon gave Binet a cramp in the stomach, so dangerously ambitious did it seem to him. And Redon was a puppet show compared to Nantes. Yet this raw lad, whom he had picked up by chance 3 weeks ago, could talk of Nantes and the Theatre Feydeau without changing color. In that short time, The boy had blossomed from a country attorney into an author and actor.
But why not Paris and the Comédie Française?
Benet wondered with sarcasm when he finally got his breath.
That may come later.
The impudent young man said.
You've been drinking, my friend.
But André-Louis detailed the plan that had been forming in his mind. Fougeray would be a training ground for Redon, and Redon would be a training ground for Nantes. They would stay in Redon as long as people paid adequately to see them. Meanwhile, they would work hard to perfect themselves. They would add 3 or 4 new talented players to the company. He would write 3 or 4 fresh scenarios, which they would test and perfect until the troupe had at least half a dozen reliable plays. They would spend a portion of their profits on better dresses and scenery. Finally, in a couple of months, if all went well, they would be ready to make their real bid for fortune at Nantes. It was true that audiences usually demanded distinction from the companies appearing at the Feda. On the other hand, Nantes had not seen a troupe of improvisers for over a generation. They would supply a novelty that all Nantes would flock to see, provided the work was done well. Scaramouche pledged that if matters were left in his hands, his revival of the Commedia dell'arte in all its glories would exceed any expectations the public might have.
We'll talk of Paris after Nantes.
He finished supremely matter-of-factly.
Just as we will definitely decide on Nantes after Redon.
The persuasiveness that could sway a mob ended by sweeping Benet off his feet. The prospect Scaramouche unfolded was terrifying, but also intoxicating. As Scaramouche delivered a crushing answer to each weakening objection, Benet ended by promising to think the matter over.
Redon will point the way,
André-Louis said.
And I don't doubt which way Redon will point.
Thus the great adventure of Redon dwindled to insignificance. Instead of a terrifying undertaking, it became merely a rehearsal for something greater. In his momentary exaltation, Benet proposed another bottle of Volnay. Scaramouche waited until the cork was drawn before continuing.
The thing remains possible,
he said casually, holding his glass to the light.
As long as I am with you. Agreed, my dear Scaramouche, agreed. Our chance meeting was a fortunate thing for both of us. For both of us,
Scaramouche said with stress.
That is as I would have it. So I do not think you will surrender me to the police just yet. As if I could think of such a thing. My dear Scaramouche, you amuse yourself. I beg that you will never allude to that little joke of mine again. It is forgotten,
André-Louis said.
And now for the remainder of my proposal. If I am to become the architect of your fortunes and build them as I have planned, I must also become the architect of my own. In the same degree.
Benet frowned.
In the same degree. From today, if you please, we will conduct the affairs of this company in a proper manner, and we will keep account books. I am an artist.
Benet said with pride.
I am not a merchant. There is a business side to your art, and that shall be conducted in a business manner. I have thought it all out for you. You shall not be troubled with details that might hinder the due exercise of your art. All you have to do is say yes or no to my proposal. And the proposal is that you constitute me your partner with an equal share in the profits of your company.
Pantaloon's great countenance grew pale. His little eyes widened to their fullest extent as he scanned his companion's face. Then he exploded.
You are mad, of course, to make me such a monstrous proposal. It has its injustices, I admit, but I have provided for them. For instance, it would not be fair that, in addition to all I am proposing to do, I should also play Scaramouche and write your scenarios without any reward outside of my half-profit as a partner. Thus, before the profits are divided, a salary must be paid to me as an actor, and a small sum for each scenario I provide. That is a matter for mutual agreement. Similarly, you shall be paid a salary as Pantaloon. After clearing those expenses and all other salaries and disbursements, the residue is the profit to be divided equally between us.
It was not a proposal that Benet would swallow easily. He began with a point-blank refusal to consider it.
In that case, my friend,
Scaramouche said.
We part company at once. Tomorrow I shall bid you a reluctant farewell.
Binet fell to raging. He spoke of ingratitude with deep feeling. He even permitted himself another sly allusion to his little jest about the police, which he had promised never to mention again.
As to that, you may do as you please. Play the informer by all means, but consider that you will just as definitely be deprived of my services. Without me, you are nothing, just as you were before I joined your company.
Binet did not care about the consequences. A fig for the consequences. He would teach this impudent young country attorney that Binet was not a man to be imposed upon.
Very well,
Scaramouche said, rising with a mix of indifference and resignation.
as you wish, but before you act, sleep on the matter. In the cold light of morning, you may see our two proposals in their proper proportions. Mine spells fortune for both of us. Yours spells ruin for both of us. Good night, Binet. Heaven help you to a wise decision.
The decision Binet finally came to was naturally the only one possible in the face of André-Louis's firm resolve. Scaramouche held all the trumps. Of course, there were further discussions before everything was settled. Binet was brought to an agreement only after an infinity of haggling, which was surprising for someone who claimed to be an artist and not a businessman. André-Louis made one or two concessions. For instance, he consented to waive his claim to be paid for scenarios. He also agreed that Binet should appoint himself a salary entirely out of proportion to his merits. Thus, the matter was settled in the end, and the announcement was duly made to the assembled company. There were, of course, jealousies and resentments, but these were not deep-seated. They were readily swallowed when everyone discovered that their lot would be materially improved with better salaries under the new arrangement. Binet had opposed this considerably, but the irresistible Scaramouche swept away all objections.
If we are to play at the Feda, you want a company of self-respecting comedians, not a pack of cringing starvelings. The better we pay them in reason, the more they will earn for us.
Thus, the company's resentment over the swift promotion of its latest recruit was conquered. Cheerfully now, with one exception, they accepted the dominance of Scaramouche. This dominance was soon so firmly established that Binet himself came under it. The one exception was Clymene. She had failed to bring this interesting young stranger to heel since he had literally dropped into their midst outside Guachin. This failure had begotten a malice in her, which his persistent ignoring of her had steadily inflamed. She had remonstrated with her father when the new partnership was first formed. She lost her temper and called him a fool. Binet, in Pantaloon's best manner, had lost his temper in return and boxed her ears. She piled it all onto Scaramouche's account and waited for her opportunity to pay off that ever-increasing score. But opportunities were few. Scaramouche was too occupied. During the week of preparation at Fougeray, he was hardly seen except at performances. Once they were at Redon, he came and went like the wind between the theater and the inn. The Redon experiment justified itself from the first. Stimulated and encouraged, André-Louis worked day and night during the month they spent in that busy little town. The moment was well chosen, for the chestnut trade centered in Redon was at its height. Every afternoon, the little theater was packed with spectators. The troupe's fame had spread, borne by chestnut growers bringing their wares to the Redon market. The audiences consisted of people from the surrounding country and neighboring villages as far out as Allaire, Saint-Périer, and St. Nicholas. To keep business from slackening, André-Louis prepared a new scenario every week. He wrote 3 in addition to the 2 he had already supplied. These were
The Marriage of Pantaloon, The Shy Lover,
and
The Terrible Captain.
the last was the greatest success. It was based on the
Miles Gloriosus
of Plautus, with great opportunities for Rhodomont, and a good part for Scaramouche as the roaring captain's sly lieutenant. Its success was largely because André-Louis amplified the scenario, indicating very fully the lines the dialogue should follow. Here and there, he went so far as to supply actual dialogue to be spoken, without making it mandatory for the actors to stick to the letter. Meanwhile, as business prospered, He became busy with tailors, improving the company's wardrobe, which sorely needed it. He tracked down a couple of needy artists and lured them into the company to play small parts, such as apothecaries and notaries. He set them to beguile their leisure time by painting new scenery so they would be ready for what he called the conquest of knots in the new year. Never in his life had he worked so hard. His fund of energy and enthusiasm was inexhaustible, like his good humor. He came and went, acted, wrote, conceived, directed, planned, and executed. Meanwhile, Benet took his ease in comparative affluence, drank Burgundy every night, ate white bread and delicacies, congratulated himself on his astuteness in making this industrious fellow his partner. Having discovered how idle his fears of Redon had been, he now began to dismiss the terrors of knots. His happiness was reflected throughout the company's ranks, always with the single exception of climbing. She had ceased to sneer at Scaramouche, realizing at last that her sneers left him untouched and recoiled upon herself. Thus, her almost indefinable resentment of him increased as it was stifled. At all costs, she had to find an outlet for it. One day, she threw herself in his path as he was leaving the theater after the performance. The others had already gone, and she had returned under the pretense of having forgotten something.
"Will you tell me what I have done to you?"
She asked point-blank.
"Done to me, mademoiselle?"
He did not understand. She made a gesture of impatience.
"Why do you hate me?" "Hate you, mademoiselle? I do not hate anybody. It is the most stupid of all emotions. I have never hated, not even my enemies." What Christian resignation! As for hating you, of all people, why, I consider you adorable. I envy Leander every day of my life. I have seriously thought of setting him to play Scaramouche so I could play lovers myself. I don't think you would be a success,
She said.
That is the only consideration restraining me. And yet, given the inspiration that Leander receives, it is possible that I might be convincing. Why, what inspiration do you mean? The inspiration of playing to so adorable a climbing.
Her lazy eyes were now alert, searching his lean face.
You are laughing at me,
She said, and swept past him into the theater on her pretended quest. There was nothing to be done with such a fellow. He was utterly without feeling. He was not a man at all. Yet when she came out again 5 minutes later, she found him still lingering at the door.
Not gone yet?
She asked superciliously.
I was waiting for you, mademoiselle. You will be walking to the inn. If I might escort you. But what gallantry, what condescension. Perhaps you would prefer that I did not? How could I prefer that, Scaramouche? Besides, we are both going the same way, and the streets are common to all. It is just that I am overwhelmed by the unusual honor.
He looked into her piquant little face and noted how obscured it was by a cloud of dignity. He laughed.
Perhaps I feared that the honor was not sought. Now I understand.
She cried.
It is for me to seek these honors. I am to woo a man before he will pay me the homage of civility. It must be so, since you, who clearly know everything, have said so. It remains for me to beg your pardon for my ignorance. It amuses you to be cruel,
Scaramouche said.
No matter. Shall we walk?
They set out together, stepping briskly to warm their blood against the wintry evening air. They walked in silence for a while, each furtively observing the other.
And so, you find me cruel?
She challenged at length, betraying that the accusation had struck home. He looked at her with a half-smile.
Will you deny it? You are the first man who ever accused me of that. I dare not suppose myself the first man to whom you have been cruel. That would be an assumption too flattering to myself. I prefer to think that the others suffered in silence. Mon Dieu, have you suffered?
She was caught between seriousness and mockery.
I place the confession as an offering on the altar of your vanity. I should never have suspected it. How could you, Am I not what your father calls a natural actor? I was an actor long before I became Scaramouche. Therefore I have laughed. I often laugh when I am hurt. When you were pleased to be disdainful, I acted disdain in turn. You acted very well.
She said without reflecting.
Of course, I am an excellent actor. And why this sudden change? In response to the change in you, you have grown weary of your part of the cruel madam. It is a dull part, believe me, and unworthy of your talents. If I were a woman and had your loveliness and grace, climbing, I would disdain using them as weapons of offense. Loveliness and grace,
She echoed, feigning amused surprise. But the vain baggage was mollified.
when did you discover this beauty and grace, M. Scaramouche?
He looked at her for a moment, considering her sprightly beauty and the adorable femininity that had irresistibly attracted him from the first.
One morning when I beheld you rehearsing a love scene with Leander.
He caught the surprise that leaped into her eyes before she veiled them under drooping lids from his seeking gaze.
Why, that was the first time you saw me. I had no earlier occasion to remark your charms. You ask me to believe too much,
She said, but her tone was softer than he had ever heard it.
then you'll refuse to believe me if I confess that it was this grace and beauty that determined my destiny that day. It urged me to join your father's troop.
At that, she became a little out of breath. There was no longer any question of finding an outlet for resentment. Resentment was completely forgotten.
But why? With what object? With the object of asking you one day to be my wife.
She halted under the shock of that statement and swung around to face him. Her glance met his without shyness now. There was a hardening glitter in her eyes and a faint stir of color in her cheeks. She suspected him of an unpardonable mockery.
You go very fast, don't you?
She asked with heat.
I do. Haven't you observed it? I am a man of sudden impulses. See what I have made of the Benet troupe in less than 2 months. Another might have labored for a year and not achieved half of it. Shall I be slower in love than in work? Would it be reasonable to expect that? I have curbed and repressed myself not to scare you with precipitancy. In doing so, I have done violence to my feelings, especially by using the same cold aloofness with which you chose to treat me. I have waited so patiently until you tired of that mood of cruelty. You are an amazing man.
She said colorlessly.
I am.
He agreed.
Only the conviction that I am not commonplace has permitted me to hope as I have hoped.
Mechanically, and as if by tacit consent, they resumed their walk.
And I ask you to observe,
He said.
when you complain that I go very fast, that I have so far asked you for nothing. How?
She asked with a frown.
I have merely told you of my hopes. I am not rash enough to ask at once whether I may realize them. My faith, but that is prudent.
She said tartly.
Of course.
It was his self-possession that exasperated her. After that, she walked the short remainder of the way in silence, and for the moment, the matter was left there. But that night, after they had supped, it chanced that when Clymene was about to retire, she and he were alone together. They were in the room above stairs that her father kept exclusively for his company. The Benet troupe, you see, was rising in the world. As Clymene rose to withdraw for the night, Scaramouche rose with her to light her candle. Holding it in her left hand, she offered him her right. It was a long, tapering, white hand at the end of a softly rounded arm that was bare to the elbow.
Good night, Scaramouche,
She said. It was so soft and tender that he caught his breath and stood scanning her with glowing dark eyes. They stood like that for a moment. Then he took the tips of her fingers in his grasp, bowed over the hand, and pressed his lips upon it. He looked at her again. Her intense femininity lured him, invited him, and surrendered to him. Her face was pale. There was a glitter in her eyes and a curious smile on her parted lips. Under her fichumenta, her bosom rose and fell, completing her betrayal. Holding her hand, he drew her towards him. She came unresisting. He took the candle from her and set it down on the sideboard beside her. The next moment, her slight, lithe body was in his arms. He kissed her, murmuring her name as if it were a prayer.
Am I cruel now?
She panted. He kissed her again as his only answer.
You made me cruel because you would not see.
She whispered next. And then the door opened, and Benet walked in. His paternal eyes were regaled by this highly indecorous behavior from his daughter. He stood gazing while they quite leisurely detached from each other with a self-possession too complete to be natural.
And what may be the meaning of this?
Benet demanded, bewildered and profoundly shocked.
Does it require explaining?
Scaramouche asked.
Doesn't it speak for itself eloquently? It means that Clymene and I have taken it into our heads to be married. And doesn't it matter what I may take into my head? Of course. But you could have neither the bad taste nor the bad heart to offer any obstacle. You take that for granted? That is your way, to be sure, taking things for granted. But my daughter is not to be taken for granted. I have very definite views for my daughter. You have done an unworthy thing, Scaramouche. You have betrayed my trust in you. I am very angry with you.
He rolled forward with his ponderous yet curiously noiseless gait. Scaramouche turned to her, smiling, and handed her the candle.
If you will leave us, Clymene, I will ask your hand of your father in proper form.
She vanished, a little fluttered and lovelier than ever in her mixture of confusion and timidity. Scaramouche closed the door and faced the enraged Benet. Pantaloon had flung himself into an armchair at the head of the short table. Scaramouche faced him with the avowed purpose of asking for Clymene's hand in proper form. And this was how he did it.
Father-in-law,
he said,
I congratulate you. This will certainly mean the Comédie Française for Clymene before long, and you shall shine in the glory she reflects. As the father of Madame Scaramouche, you may yet be famous.
Benet glared at him in speechless stupefaction, his face slowly empurpling. His rage was more utter because of his humiliating conviction that whatever he might say or do, this irresistible fellow would bend him to his will. At last, speech returned to him.
You're a damned corsair,
he cried thickly, banging his ham-like fist upon the table.
A corsair. First you sail in and plunder me of half my legitimate gains. And now you want to carry off my daughter. But I'll be damned if I'll give her to a graceless, nameless scoundrel like you. The gallows are waiting for you already.
Scaramouche pulled the bell rope, not discomposed at all. He smiled. There was a flush on his cheeks and a gleam in his eyes. He was very pleased with the world that night. He really owed a great debt to de Lestiguières.
Benet,
he said.
Forget for once that you are Pantaloon. Behave as a nice, amiable father-in-law should behave when he has secured a son-in-law of exceptional merits. We are going to have a bottle of Burgundy at my expense, and it shall be the best bottle of Burgundy found in Redon. Compose yourself to do fitting honor to it. Excitations of the bile invariably impair the fine sensitiveness of the palate.
Chapter 7. The Conquest of Nantes. The Benet troupe opened in Nantes on the feast of the Purification with
The Rogueries of Scaramouche,
a fact you can still discover in surviving copies of the
Courrier Nantais.
They did not come to Nantes as they had previously gone to little country villages and townships. In the past, they had arrived unheralded and depended entirely on the parade of their entrance to attract attention. André-Louis had borrowed from the business methods of the Comédie Française. He handled matters entirely in his own masterful fashion. He had ordered the printing of playbills at Redon. For days before the company arrived in Nantes, these bills were pasted outside the Theatre Feydeau and elsewhere around the town. Such announcements were still unusual at the time, and they attracted considerable attention. He had entrusted the task to Basque, an intelligent young man who was one of the company's newest recruits. He sent him ahead of the troupe for this purpose. You can see one of these playbills for yourself in the Carnavalet Museum. It lists the players by their stage names only, with the exception of Monsieur Benet and his daughter. By ignoring the fact that the actor who plays Trivelin in one piece appears as Tabarin in another, the bill makes the company seem at least half as large again as it really was. It announces that they will open with
The Rogueries of Scaramouche.
This would be followed by 5 other plays whose titles are provided by other unnamed plays that would be added if the patronage in the distinguished and enlightened city of Nantes encouraged the Binet troupe to prolong its stay at the Theatre Feydeau. The bill places great stress on the fact that this is a company of improvisers in the old Italian manner, the likes of which had not been seen in France for half a century. It exhorts the public of Nantes not to miss this opportunity to witness these distinguished mimes who are reviving the glories of the Comédie de l'Art. The announcement proceeds to state that their visit to Nantes is preliminary to a visit to Paris. There, they intend to throw down the gauntlet to the actors of the Comédie Française. They plan to show the world how the art of the improviser is superior to that of the actor who depends on an author for his lines, and who consequently says the exact same thing every time he plays in the same piece. It was an audacious bill. Its audacity had scared Monsieur Binet out of the little sense left to him by the Burgundy, which he could afford to abuse in these days. He had offered the most vehement opposition. André-Louis had swept part of this aside and disregarded the rest.
I admit that it is audacious,
said Scaramouche.
But at your time of life you should have learned that nothing succeeds like audacity in this world. I forbid it. I absolutely forbid it.
Monsieur Binet insisted.
I knew you would, just as I know that you will be very grateful to me presently for not obeying you. You are inviting a catastrophe. I am inviting fortune. The worst catastrophe that can overtake you is to be back in the market halls of the country villages from which I rescued you. I will have you in Paris yet in spite of yourself. Leave this to me.
He went out to attend to the printing. His preparations did not end there. He wrote a piquant article on the glories of the Comédie de l'Art and its resurrection by the improvising troupe of the great mime Florimond Binet. Binet's name was not Florimond. It was just Pierre. But André-Louis had a great sense of the theater. That article was an amplification of the stimulating material contained in the playbills. He persuaded Basque, who had relations in Nantes, to use all the influence he could command and all the bribery they could afford to get that article printed in the
Courrier Nantais.
A couple of days before the arrival of the Binet troupe. Basque had succeeded. This is not at all surprising considering the undoubted literary merits and intrinsic interest of the article. And so Binet and his company descended upon an already expectant city in that first week of February. Monsieur Binet would have made his entrance in the usual manner with a full-dress parade, banging drums, and crashing cymbals. But André-Louis offered the most relentless opposition to this.
We would only reveal our poverty,
he said.
Instead, we will creep into the city unobserved and leave ourselves to the imagination of the public.
He had his way, of course. Monsieur Binet was already worn out from battling against the strong waters of this young man's will. He was completely unequal to the contest now that he found Clymene in alliance with Scaramouche. She added her insistence to his and joined him in criticizing her father's sluggish and reactionary wits. Metaphorically, Monsieur Binet threw up his arms. He cursed the day he had taken this young man into his troupe, and he allowed the current to carry him wherever it would. He was persuaded that he would drown in the end. Meanwhile, he would drown his vexation in Burgundy. At least there was an abundance of Burgundy. He had never found Burgundy so plentiful in his life. Perhaps things were not as bad as he imagined after all. He reflected that, when all was said and done, he had to thank Scaramouche for the Burgundy. He would hope for the best, while fearing the worst. It was very much the worst that he feared as he waited in the wings when the curtain rose on their first performance at the Theatre Feydeau. The house was tolerably filled by a public whose curiosity had been thoroughly stimulated by the preliminary announcements. Although the scenario of
The Rogueries of Scaramouche
has not apparently survived, we know from the
Confessions
of André-Louis that it opens with Polichinelle in the character of an arrogant and fiercely jealous lover. He is shown in the act of beguiling the waiting maid, Columbine, to play the spy upon her mistress, Clymene. He begins with cajolery, But he fails in this with the saucy Columbine. She prefers cajolers to be at least attractive and to pay due deference to her own very piquant charms. The fierce humpbacked scoundrel passes on to threats of the terrible vengeance he will wreak upon her if she betrays him or neglects to obey him implicitly. He fails here as well, and he finally has recourse to bribery. After he bleeds himself freely to the expectant Columbine, he succeeds by these means in obtaining her consent to spy upon Clymene and to report to him on her lady's conduct. The pair played the scene well together. They were perhaps stimulated by their very nervousness at finding themselves before such an imposing audience. Polichinelle was everything that is fierce, contemptuous, and insistent. Columbine was the essence of pert indifference under his cajolery. She was saucily mocking under his threats, and she was finely sly in extorting the absolute maximum when it came to accepting a bribe. Laughter rippled through the audience and promised well. But Monsieur Binet, standing and trembling in the wings, missed the great guffaws of the rustic spectators to whom they had played previously. His fears steadily mounted. Then, Scaramouche bounds in through the window scarcely after Polichinelle departs through the door. It was an effective entrance, and it was usually performed with a broad comic effect that set the people in a roar. This was not the case on this occasion. Scaramouche had meditated in bed that morning and decided to present himself in a totally different aspect. He would cut out all the broad play and the usual clowning that had delighted their past rude audiences. He would obtain his effects by subtlety instead. He would present a slyly humorous rogue. He would be restrained and possess a certain dignity, wearing a countenance of complete solemnity. He would speak his lines dryly, as if he were unconscious of the humor with which he intended to invest them. Though it might take the audience longer to understand and discover him, they would like him all the better in the end. True to that resolve, he now played his part as the friend and hired ally of the lovesick Leander. He came on his behalf for news of Clymene, seizing the opportunity to further his own affair with Columbine and his designs upon the moneybags of Pantaloon. He had also taken certain liberties with the traditional costume of Scaramouche. He had caused the black doublet and breeches to be slashed with red, the doublet to be cut more to a peak in the style of Henry III. He replaced the conventional black velvet cap with a conical hat that had a turned-up brim and a tuft of feathers on the left. He discarded the guitar. Monsieur Binet listened desperately for the roar of laughter that usually greeted the entrance of Scaramouche, and his dismay increased when it did not come. He then became conscious of something alarmingly unusual in Scaramouche's manner. The sibilant foreign accent was there, but none of the broad boisterousness their audiences had loved. He wrung his hands in despair.
"It is all over,"
he said.
"The fellow has ruined us. It serves me right for being a fool and allowing him to take control of everything."
He was profoundly mistaken. He began to have an inkling of this when he took the stage himself presently and found the public attentive. He remarked a grin of quiet appreciation on every upturned face. However, it was not until the thunders of applause greeted the fall of the curtain on the first act that he felt quite sure they would be allowed to escape with their lives. Had the part of Pantaloon in
The rogueries
been anything other than that of a blundering and timid old idiot, Binet would have ruined it by his apprehensions. As it was, those very apprehensions magnified the hesitancy and bewilderment that were the essence of his part, and they contributed to the success. It proved to be a success that more than justified all the heralding of which Scaramouche had been guilty. This success was not confined to the public for Scaramouche himself. A great reception awaited him from his companions assembled in the green room of the theater at the end of the play. His talent, resourcefulness, and energy had raised them in a few weeks from a pack of vagrant mountebanks to a self-respecting company of first-rate players. They acknowledged it generously in a speech entrusted to Polichinelle. They added the tribute to his genius that they would conquer the world under his guidance, just as they had conquered Knots. In their enthusiasm, they were a little neglectful of the feelings of Monsieur Binet. He had already been irritated enough by the overriding of his every wish and by the consciousness of his weakness when opposed to Scaramouche. He had suffered the gradual process of usurpation of authority because its every step had been attended by his own greater profit. However, resentment lived deep down inside him and stifled every spark of the gratitude he owed to his partner. His nerves had been on the rack tonight, and he had suffered agonies of apprehension. He blamed Scaramouche so bitterly for all of this that not even the ultimate success, which was almost miraculous when all the elements are considered, could justify his partner in his eyes. Now, he found himself additionally ignored by this company. It was his own company, which he had laboriously and slowly assembled and selected among the men of ability whom he had found here and there in the dregs of cities. This was something that stirred his bile and aroused the malevolence that never did more than slumber inside him. Deeply though his rage was moved, it did not blind him to the folly of betraying it. It was imperative that he assert himself in this hour, unless he were forever to become a thing of no account in this troop. He had lorded over it for long months before this interloper came among them to fill his purse and destroy his authority. He stepped forward now when Polichinelle finished speaking. His makeup assisted him in masking his bitter feelings, and he professed to add his own acclamations of his dear partner to those of Polichinelle. He did it in such a manner as to make it clear that whatever Scaramouche had done, he had done by Monsieur Benet's favor. It seemed that Monsieur Benet had been the guiding hand in all of it. In associating himself with Polichinelle, he desired to thank Scaramouche much in the manner of a lord rendering thanks to his steward for services diligently rendered and orders scrupulously carried out. It neither deceived the troop nor mollified himself. Indeed, his consciousness of the mockery of it only increased his bitterness. But at least it saved his face and rescued him from nullity, since he was their chief. To say that it did not deceive them is perhaps to say too much, for it deceived them at least on the score of his feelings. After discounting the insinuations in which he took all credit to himself, they believed that he was filled with gratitude at heart, just as they were. That belief was shared by André-Louis himself. In his brief and grateful answer, he was very generous to Monsieur Benet, more than endorsing the claims that Monsieur Benet had made. Then followed the announcement from him that their success in Nantes was even sweeter to him because it rendered the dearest wish of his heart almost immediately attainable. This wish was to make Clymene his wife. It was a felicity of which he was the first to acknowledge his utter unworthiness. It would bring him into still closer relations with his good friend Monsieur Benet, to whom he owed all that he had achieved for himself and for them. The announcement was joyously received, for the world of the theater loves a lover as dearly as the greater world does. They acclaimed the happy pair, with the exception of poor Leander, whose eyes were more melancholy than ever. They were a happy family that night in the upstairs room of their inn on the Quai de la Fosse. It was the same inn from which André-Louis had set out some weeks ago to play a vastly different role before an audience in Nantes. He wondered if it was really so different. Had he not been a sort of Scaramouche then? He had been an intriguer, glib and specious, deceiving people and cynically misleading them with opinions that were not really his own. Was it at all surprising that he should have made so rapid and signal a success as a mime? Was this not really all that he had ever been, the very thing for which nature had designed him? They played
The Shy Lover
to a full house on the following night. The fame of their debut had gone abroad, and the success of Monday was confirmed. On Wednesday they gave
Figaro Scaramouche.
On Thursday morning the
Courrier Nantais
came out with an article of more than a column praising these brilliant improvisers. It claimed that they utterly put to shame the mere reciters of memorized parts. André-Louis laughed inwardly as he read the sheet at breakfast, having no delusions about the falseness of that statement. The novelty of the thing, and the pretentiousness in which he had wrapped it, had deceived them finally. He turned to greet Benet and Clymene as they entered at that moment, and he waved the sheet above his head.
It is settled,
he announced.
We stay in Nantes until Easter. Do we?
Said Benet sourly.
You settle everything, my friend. Read for yourself.
He handed him the paper. Monsieur Benet read it moodily. He set the sheet down in silence and turned his attention to his breakfast.
Was I justified or not?
Asked André-Louis, who found Monsieur Benet's behavior a bit intriguing.
In what? In coming to Nantes? If I had not thought so, we would not have come,
said Binet, and he began to eat. André-Louis dropped the subject, wondering. After breakfast, he and Clymene sallied forth to take the air upon the quays. It was a day of brilliant sunshine and less cold than it had been lately. Columbine tactlessly joined them as they were setting out, though matters were improved a little in this respect when Harlequin came running after them and attached himself to Columbine. André-Louis stepped out ahead with Clymene and spoke of the thing that was uppermost in his mind at the moment.
Your father is behaving very oddly towards me,
he said.
It is almost as if he had suddenly become hostile. You are imagining it,
she said.
My father is very grateful to you, as we all are. He is anything but grateful. He is infuriated with me, and I think I know the reason. Don't you? Can't you guess? I really can't. If you were my daughter, Clymene, which God be thanked you are not, I would feel aggrieved against the man who carried you away from me. Poor old Pantaloon. He called me a corsair when I told him that I intended to marry you. He was right. You are a bold robber, Scaramouche. It is in the character,
he said.
Your father believes in having his mimes play the parts upon the stage that suit their natural temperaments. Yes, you take everything you want, don't you?
She looked up at him, half adoringly and half shyly.
If it is possible,
he said.
I took his consent to our marriage from him by main force. I never waited for him to give it. In fact, when he refused it, I simply snatched it from him, and I will defy him now to win it back from me. I think that is what he most resents.
She laughed and launched into an animated answer, but he did not hear a word of it. A cabriolet approached them through the bustle of traffic on the quay. The upper half of it was made almost entirely of glass. It was drawn by two magnificent bay horses and driven by a superbly liveried coachman. A slight young girl sat alone in the cabriolet, wrapped in a lynx fur pelisse, and her face was of delicate loveliness. She was leaning forward with her lips parted, and her eyes devoured Scaramouche until they drew his gaze. When that happened, the shock of it brought him abruptly to a dumbfounded halt. Clymene checked in the middle of a sentence. Arrested by his sudden stopping, she plucked at his sleeve.
What is it, Scaramouche?
He made no attempt to answer her. At that moment, the coachman, to whom the little lady had already signaled, brought the carriage to a standstill beside them. Seen in the gorgeous setting of that coach, with its escutcheon panels, its portly coachman, its white-stockinged footman who swung instantly to earth as the vehicle stopped, its dainty occupant seemed to Clymene like a princess out of a fairy tale. This princess leaned forward with glowing eyes and flushed cheeks, stretching out a choicely gloved hand to Scaramouche.
André-Louis,
she called him. Scaramouche took the hand of that exalted being, just as he might have taken the hand of Clymene herself, with eyes that reflected the gladness of her own. In a voice that echoed her joyous surprise, he addressed her familiarly by name, just as she had addressed him.
Aline.